But I just wanted to remind everybody about the community meetings that are coming up. Does everybody have that information on their calendars? Okay. I can say this. Monday, February 17th at Cane Ridge High School. Tuesday, February 18th, McGavick High School. Monday, February 24th, Carter Lawrence Elementary. Thursday, February 27th at Hillwood. And so because the mayor has proposed a really compressed timeline, that is the extent of the community meetings we'll do. So we really want to do a good push to get people to turn out to those. And then, of course, like last year, it's the same presentation done 4 times. And so then there's just some dialogue with whoever attends and questions and conversations. And so we've also talked about having a public participation. Where people can do public hearings, is that what it's called? Working on those dates, correct? Okay. So,
Could I add something as well? Do you need everything, Rachel?
I do have that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next thing that we were going to talk about is the need for advocacy with the council and the mayor on whatever we decide and what we finalize as the budget. But because it is a condensed schedule, we need to go ahead and have some of those conversations in order to build goodwill and to, of course, be front of mind. In order to do that means that we need to have a consistent and clear message, and that we all have the same kind of volume and understanding of what we want to prioritize on the budget. So we're hoping to get some collateral to y'all. You may remember that last year we had this piece that was a front and back that had information about the budget. Of course, this was once it was approved. And then the top 5 investments. So hopefully we will have something like that for you. But until then, we want to make sure that everyone understands that, again, a lot of the things that we discussed at the board retreat are priorities, but not everything can be budgeted for. And it's important that we not only state what we need, but how we're going to get it. And so I want to make sure that we all kind of have as a conversation as a board that when we talk with council and when we talk with the mayor's office, that it's important that we advocate for more funding of our schools. And in essence, that's going to mean that we're going to be requesting and asking for a property tax raise because it is the only way that we can then have those additional funds. So we need to be able to have a consistent conversation as a board, and that's something that I welcome here if we need to have that, so that we can speak eloquently to that. It has been since 2012 since our city has had one. We also have the historically lowest property tax rate since we've become a metropolis since 1968. So it's really important that it happens not just for schools, but also for city and fire. We just happen to be in charge of schools. So that is a conversation that we would like to make sure that everyone on the board is comfortable with having and is able to be supportive of. I feel like I'm not looking at you because you're to my left, and I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Back of your head's fine. That's good.
So are there any questions about that, or what kind of materials they want, or maybe they didn't like this last year, or anything along those lines?
Well, I personally,
go ahead.
I thought that was helpful to have a one-pager like that. And, when we have these community meetings that, Ms. Pooper Walker had already spoke of, I think we need to bring those, like a stack of them, so that if someone, wants to go home and do a deep dive into it, and maybe even have your card with them so that they can, reach out to whomever's district it is and say, I didn't ask this that night, but I do have this question. I think that might be helpful.
Okay.
So help me understand because I know right now we seem to be talking operating, and the one-pager only spoke to operating dollars.
You had one for capital as well.
Yeah, so, but I don't remember if those were both presented at the community meetings, or were they ready? I don't think they were. So with the compressed timeline, are we able to now have both of those available at the time of those committees? Because I think now the timeline being different, we could actually have both available.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
One would be an approved budget, and one would be a drafted budget at the time of those meetings.
Hank, did you want to say something?
Well, it would be.
Neither one of them.
Wouldn't it be for us as capital needs? We would have already voted on that.
We would have voted on capital, yeah.
I'm sorry, I used the wrong terminology. Yes, it would be one that we had voted on, but the one for operating would be at the draft that we had not voted on yet.
Right. So, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. But at least we would have that available. And I think that that's of import as well.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we have them both.
Okay.
Right. Anything other questions around the timeline or the collateral materials?
Any other thoughts about approach on advocacy, things that you recall, and from the past, or anything you think we should have top of mind?
So I think last budget, no, the capital improvement budget meeting, there were pretty much probably five good, this is what you need to know about this budget. So I think capturing those would be good, in addition to, so we can have a similar format for the capital budget that we have for this one.
Okay.
So.
Can I ask a question about operational? So I'm going to bring up this point. It won't be popular, but that's what I get paid the big bucks for. Chris, as we go into our operation budget, we might want to take a hard look at our board travel reimbursement budget line. It currently is at $13,000 for, and as our policy states, it's to be divided 10 different ways, with the last 10th being reserved for board chair or emergency travel. Personally, I like to put that in like a, put it in an account, forget it's there kind of thing. But to date, we already have spent almost 11 grand of the 13 grand that were allotted. And the only way that I can approve any further expenses would be to increase the 13 grand from some other budget line, which good luck finding that in this, austere budget. We've already done our budget amendment for the year, so, that wouldn't apply. You have some thoughts on that?
Sure, and we've typically asked the board office what to budget in relation to the board's budget, and the board office would ask the board chair or ask the board members. We can adjust that accordingly based upon input from the board chair and the rest of the board. We potentially can do another budget amendment in the spring if we need one, and so if we need to make any adjustments for basically the second half of the fiscal year, we could do that. That would possibly be something to look at for this fiscal year, and then for next fiscal year, based upon whatever the estimate would be for board travel, we can include in what is presented to you for this coming year, 2021.
Okay. We'll have to take a hard look on that, because this total does not include anybody any board members attending NSBA, which is March? Yeah, April? Yeah, and so there are several of us that like to attend. And these aren't just, fun stuff, trips to go on. These are actually related to the work that we do on a daily basis. So I think they're important for us to attend, whether it's CUBE or Council of Great City School or NSBA or anything like that. I think it's important that board members do avail themselves of those conferences. So that's even before any NSBA expenses. So I think we need to take, a look at that, because especially the conference trips, I don't want to say, no, you can't attend, because they directly impact the work that we do.
Sure,
So,
we
okay,
can do that.
thank you.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, yeah.
Or I guess it's maybe your, because it's your, can I ask a question since it's your meeting?
Go for it.
Okay. On this one-sheeter that we're discussing that we're going to have that we found helpful from last year, it does have on the back what we've considered our top 5 investments. For that, we would use the top 5 investments that we discussed in the board retreat, which were compensation, SEL work, textbooks, pre-K. I think we have it listed as pre-kindergarten preservation. So we will, of course, ask if you have any rejections to that, but those are all the things that we talked about during the board retreat as well. So is that still okay, or does there need to be an additional conversation about that?
Yeah, I raised questions and concerns of just not doing the top 5. I think you all had a list of things. I think we about 11 things on there or something like that. And if we're going to have these community meetings, again, what if those top 5s are not their top 5 priorities? So I want to be able to expand it a little bit, even though it may come back that majority will be the top 5. But I think it's important I've stated this, that these are taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure that we are listening and we're good stewards of this money. So I would like to see it expanded.
It's not that it can't be expanded, it's what we would be presenting to them is the drafted budget, which would automatically have a top 5 investments. Since, like I said, not everything can be invested into, unfortunately. So it would not be to say what you think, Mr. or Mrs. Smith is not important. We would definitely take back that feedback as we did in the past community meetings. But it would be to say, this is what we have. I think it's important for us to tell people what we think is our top 5 investments. That's our responsibility as a professional and a politician, is to say, here's what you voted for me to say, here's what I think are the top 5 investments that we need to make. That's our job. And if they don't like those, then they can tell us. That's their responsibility as well. But we can't leave it, I think it's unwise to leave it open, or we will not have a strategy. So we have to go in and say, here's what our proposal is. Here's what we think our top 5 are. This is based upon board conversations and already constituent feedback for a lot of us. And if you have something different, or if you want to expand or decrease on this, that's why we're having these meetings. But I think they need to know what direction we're heading into so they can say whether they like it or not. And so my gut instinct is that we need to let them know what direction we're heading in so that it can be a more fruitful conversation and hopefully not, I would think that's really frustrating for someone coming to a meeting. If they don't know where we're headed, they can't say yes or no on that.
And so that's the reason why I said that it's important that we add everything that we discussed in our retreat. Even if we come up with our top 5, I would like my constituents to see that there are other options, there are things that be more important to them, and they can see that. So when we only just talk about our top 5, that is something that we are saying that's more important than what they feel. And I think if we open it up and make it more broad, it may become that when it comes to community support or whatever that line item was, that 10% of people said that's not important to us. But we need to be transparent. And so that's something I would like to present, to be able to show, here are some of our priorities. Here are our top 5. So maybe for my meeting, maybe that's something that we can put together, I can do, so that's fine. But I don't want it to be where we only have our top 5 and it's gonna be so inclusive to that. I don't want that to be for my, constituents to see that. So
Again, it's really important that we have a concise and clear message for all of us. So I would definitely not want us to have separate collateral, because that would be problematic for lots of reasons. It doesn't necessarily have to be 5 things on the back. It can be whatever we really prioritize as that budget is drafted. So that number might change to 6 or 7 or whatever it might be. So we'll kind of see what the draft is and come up from there what these top investments are going to be, of what we think are best. And of course, if there's additional places that people want to have us redraft the budget, they can let us know that. But I would not have it as open-ended, because that's not a draft. That's a beginning of a draft. That's not a workable place. But they're more than welcome to tell us that information so we can go back and work on it. But this isn't a starting jumping off point. We're giving them our jumping off point and we go from there, if that makes sense.
So, and I'll let you too, but yeah, so let's do that. So let's not do 5. Let's open it up so that it won't be our top 5. It needs to surround around other parties that I think we spoke about in our retreat. So who's doing the draft? Who's going to be doing the draft? So I can add to whatever I want. I can just say, hey, these are my recommendations. And then whatever, if it comes up to 7 things, add into your 5, then that way I'm going to say, okay, I think that what I've heard my constituents say, these are top priorities for them.
Yep.
So then that way I'll be able to collaborate with whoever's doing the draft. And then that way that it all can be inclusive with those likes too.
Yep, we would have that information from that survey of what everybody said were the top ones from each person's district. And then, of course, whatever Chris is able to, get together on our draft, on finalization. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be a final 5. It can be a 6 or 2 or 3 or whatever it ends up being.
Chris, would you like me to submit that to you, or you're fine with that? You want me to submit it to you?
I think it's the communications team that puts together the flyer.
No, I'm saying what I would like to see as far as what I've been hearing, because I see y'all's top 5.
Well,
But
we've
why not
all
add?
already seen it because you put it in the Survey Monkey that you completed when we had the retreat.
Those are not all my top 5.
Well, then there was a subject line on the bottom that said other. And
No, I didn't.
Did you place them
I
there?
didn't do other. I did other things besides the top 5 because, I had options. So
Yeah, that's where the 11 things were, and you chose from them.
So here's the thing, so we can kind of move forward. So again, I don't want it to be top 5. I would like to see it more broad because those top 5 may not be my constituents' top 5. So I would like to hear those constituents who have their priorities, so it won't be so confined, is what I'm saying. So what I can do, I can submit out of the 11, maybe 4 more added to your 5 that I've heard my constituents say they want to hear about the budget. So that's what I'll propose.
A little bit of a chicken and egg situation because the sheet is meant to be taken out to the community meetings to have a discussion as opposed to getting the discussion, coming back and creating the list.
Right, we're kind of past that.
We're not trying to create a list. What I want to do is be able to make sure that it is broad enough that my constituents that I serve, those top 5 may not be their top 5. So I may have other things that you all presented on your list that I feel that could be more, that could also be a conversation. And that's where I want mine to go, if that's the case, because I don't want it to be just a top 5.
Amy?
How about as a compromise for the meetings, and then we can take this feedback and craft where we want. Have the number that the board, we decide is going to be in the budget. Have those as the primary, whatever, the primary list, and then have some sort of line below that lists the other considerations that we are looking at, and that way it would all be on there, and then you would still have the priorities, and then after the meetings, we get all that feedback and have an opportunity for them to bring up other issues or look at the list that we have, then we make a final advocacy sheet that then we take to council or whoever we. I'm trying to find a way that just says like a compromise so that the public can see, like, we're looking at a lot of things, but we can't fund everything, and then these are the priorities we've listed, if you have
I
other
would say
feedback, that might be a compromise.
That's kind of, I think, how, not as structured, but I think that's kind of how the community meetings went in the past, of here's what we say we
Yeah.
think the top 5 are, but we want your feedback, and here's all it's talked about, but not written out per se, of here's all the things that we've discussed, and here's all the things that we think we could budget.
Yeah.
What is important to you, what's not, and then we take that feedback back, and that's when we had all of our open budget meetings of hashing all that out of what we heard from our community meetings. So I think that's what I anticipate would really happen.
Yeah, but even on that sheet, if she's worried about the sheet for the meetings, you could just have like a parenthetical, asterisk or something where you have everything listed, and then that way people, I don't know.
Just like
But
a
wouldn't that be in the copy of the budget? And so is this the only thing we're bringing?
Well, there's a presentation.
Right, so in the presentation, it will show the other things that we're budgeting for.
Yes, it usually does.
And so, to be clear, the things that we typically put here are district-wide investments.
Yes, they are district-specific.
Right.
Not-
District-wide.
District-wide,
Nothing
excuse me,
specific.
not
No,
not
they're
specific to any individual.
system-wide. Yeah, so they're top level, high level, every school will benefit to some degree and at some level from these investments.
The meetings are about the
But weren't
district.
11 about that? That's where I'm confused. All 11 were district-wide, right? I think that's what
think
she's
so.
stuck on.
I think
is that
so.
She wants those other, however many.
Six.
Six or however many,
Right.
yeah, end up doing just somewhere listed, that's all.
So I just want to be
However
clear,
we
the
wanna list
others
them,
that would be added are things that were discussed in the retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, just whatever the list was that we were
Wonderful.
working on.
Sounds like a
That's
plan.
all, okay.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
That's all.
All right. Yeah, so if we can start working on this and start getting it circulated so that people can react to it, because again, I think, and I would agree, we need to, whatever we present needs to be the same thing we present at all of the meetings.
Agreed.
There's no customization because we want to be clear, there's not really a meeting in North Nashville. So none of these locations are accommodating North Nashville. So I couldn't even have that argument of, I need to add things that are of interest to my constituents. So it needs to remain consistent across the board.
Was there a reason why you don't have one in your district?
I don't know, I didn't pick the location. She didn't have one, but, I mean,
4 total. And
there's
12
4 of them, and I think, are these the same 4 locations we used last time?
No.
They're not? No.
Because I thought we were trying to get each quadrant, you know, as
Yeah, I
much as
know.
we could to
Yep, they're
make
each
sure everybody
quadrant.
was touched.
But that's not each district.
It's not each district, but none of those are close to where my folks would be floating over to.
Mine won't be going to.
Yeah. So we'll have to agree to do something different, additional, probably.
We're doing one.
I mean, between the two of us, we'll just take the same presentation, and if it's inconvenient to,
If that means anything, that's what I typically do. Like last year, I took the same exact presentation that they gave us,
Yeah.
and not only did I go to the different meetings that that MNPS Central Office was hosting, but I used them in the same 3 that I do every year anyway, so
Right.
it was perfect.
yeah. So we'll just keep doing that.
Any other thoughts about the one-pager?
Just to be clear, it'll be uploaded on the website
Yeah.
even when there are new iterations of it, right? So let's say mid-March or mid-February, we have one, and then mid-March, we end up with another one.
And update it when you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha, okay. That's good.
Any other thoughts on advocacy, on planning?
I would say the one pager was good. Maybe on the other side, this time last year, it made it easier for us to understand and comprehend and give the top lines of what the school board was asking or was requesting at the time. So, and I think for the council members, it really helped just put everything in a succinct way. Just given at the time the budget, that was seeing the hour-long budget meeting. It was able for you to focus really quick and hone in where are the top lines that was requested. So I think it was very clear and clean and efficient. So I hope we do it again, just from being on the other side. It made it a lot easier to kind of, the major points that were different. So it helped just clarify that.
Great. All right, I'm going to pass the baton to the capital budget.
Okay, so if you guys can come up and just share with us whatever changes from the one we saw, I guess, last meeting. And I guess I'm not sure who we need to pin the rows on to provide you with what we need for the one pager for the capital budget. So I don't know if we want to do a front and back, kind of condense what we did, so that it's one side's capital, one side's operating, or just have a separate, I think it would make it easier. I mean, there's some big font on here. So,
never done that for the
like
capital.
the heading takes up a fourth of the page. Like this part right here, that's all dead space. So maybe we can do something to do something front and back for capital and operating.
Can we work with Mr. Braisted's office to do that?
Sure,
Welcome and thank you.
we will.
Okay.
We ready? Okay.
Yep.
Just to acclimate you to what you have, everyone should have a packet of documents. These are the same documents that were included in the amended board agenda for your approval at the board meeting this evening. The first document, which is multi-paged and multicolored, is basically the 10-year capital improvement budget request. Mainly referencing column H, which is the year one request, which is our request for 2021 as it relates to capital funding. You have a legend down at the bottom of the page, which identifies all of the different colors and what they mean. You also have included in your packet a one-pager of just the year one requests, which again are reflected in column H of the 5-page document. They are separated on both documents by school-specific projects at the top, and then district-wide projects at the bottom. District-wide projects including district-wide HVAC needs, electrical, plumbing, as well as technology and school buses and vehicles, which in our case are funded through the capital budget. And then the last document that you have looks like this. It's called the School Enrollment and Capacity Report. It shows 5 years worth of enrollment for each school. It is categorized by cluster, and so it starts with the Antioch cluster and shows enrollment trends starting with the 2015-16 year, Going to the current year, the 40-day count is always in October, so showing what that is. And then over on the right shows what the program capacity for each school within that cluster would be within each tier, and what the utilization percentage is as it relates to the calculation of the program capacity to the current year student enrollment. Anything that has a shade means that there is capital funding approved to alleviate any overcapacity issues. So all three of these documents are important. There has been one change made to the presentation that we made at the last Capital Needs Committee, and so I'm going to let David and Casey talk through that, but I will just say a few words about the process just as a reminder. The board is required by the Metro Charter to approve what's called a capital improvement budget request, or CIB request. It's key to realize that this is simply a request at this point. From here, after the board approves this tonight, it will go to Metro Planning. Metro Planning will then accumulate all capital improvement budget requests across all of Metro government, including all other agencies, and accumulate that into a capital improvement budget document. There's a requirement for a 6-year capital improvement budget request from each agency. Of course, we do a 10-year. And then at some point in the future, the mayor will recommend what's called a capital spending plan to the Metro Council. And so until something is included in an approved capital spending plan, it remains simply a request, even if it's reflected in certain columns as it relates to certain years. And so that's why we have so many requests that continue to be a year-one request year after year after year, because they have been simply a request and not included in the capital spending plan that is ultimately approved by the Metro Council. So with that process laid out, I'll let David and/or Casey explain in more detail the documents that you have and any change from our last committee meeting. Yes.
Can I ask one quick question? What is the name of the score that's allocated to each building or space? Facility score?
Facility Condition Index score. FCI, Facility Condition Index. Typically the lower.
G. I'm sorry.
Yeah, column G. Typically, the lower the facility condition index score, the higher the priority. Likewise, the higher the building utilization, i.e. overcrowding, typically that elevates that particular project higher on the priority list as it relates to the different years.
Thank you.
Sure. David?
Thanks, Chris. The only change that we have is with Lillard School that was in year 1, and we have now moved that down to year 2. In hopes that through our MNPS next process, as Dr. Gentry pointed out, I believe the last board meeting, that we would look at to see if we could facilitate that school in some manner, potentially avoiding the cost of the $18 million renovation I believe we had originally scheduled.
Did we move we didn't move anything into its spot though, right? So it just reduced overall. So we went from 401 to 3, okay.
Okay, so maybe I'm not, you said that Lillard went from year 1 to year 2?
Yeah, so Robert Lillard is now on row 18,
Oh, okay, I see.
over in year 2.
Yes.
I see.
And so last meeting, we had a $401,000 roughly,
401 million.
$401 million total, and now it's down to
It's
382.
now 382. That's
Okay.
correct.
Anna was about to write a check at $401,000. I'm sorry.
You're in divorce court. So am I to assume that we've heard nothing on our capital needs request from last year?
That is correct.
Oh, we heard something. It's just 0, right? Chirp, chirp.
Deafening. The silence is deafening.
Is that the silence is 0? Is that what that means? Okay, nothing?
Silence is 0.
We heard,
My question is on the capacity form, the schools that have the shading, as it was called, does that mean that they are actually funded, or that we have approved that as a budget item?
it's on the top year 1.
It's on the top year 1?
Yeah,
Is that what we're saying?
it's in the year 1 group.
So like,
Like when you see Antioch Middle School, yeah, that's item number 1.
The shading means that if you look at the bottom,
Hillsborough High School.
it means that we actually have approved capital funding to add capacity. In the case of Antioch Middle School, we only have the funding for the land, and so we do not have the funding needed for the building. But we did go ahead and shade that, since we do have approved capital funding for land. And then I think the only other one is the Hillsborough project, which we obviously know is in process.
If I could just ask on this form here, just to be consistent, that column that says MNPS program capacity, and we can make it say capacity utilization so that it matches what we have on the multicolor form, because program capacity and capacity utilization kind of say two different things.
We can do that.
Thank you, I just appreciate it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Look like you want to ask something, Ms. Elrod.
I just,
No, she-
I just really don't like that we don't have any money on it, so.
And nothing's changed on the district-wide?
It remains the same.
Yeah. All right. Any questions about anything? So again, if we can just get like whatever the 3 or 4 talking points are around our capital ask, and then we can work on the one-pager and have all of that information together, which I think is a good thing.
We can have that put together in a short amount of time.
All right, thank you.
I now have a question. Sorry.
Frida?
Yes, ma'am.
So by chance, if the mayor's office decide to come up with a capital spending plan, let's say in May, for the 2019-20 year, we will be using this one for, if they would give us funding, or use the one from last year? Does
Well-
that make sense?
Depends on how they give it to us.
Let Chris chime in if I misspeak here, but it would be my understanding the board is going to vote on this tonight. So this will be the actual CIB request that will be going downtown. So if they were to give us anything, it would come from, it may come as an early gift, if you will, from this one, and perhaps then after Metro Council, later on, would decide that additional monies might be available from this one. I doubt after we submit this one, I don't know this for a fact, I doubt that they would supplement off of 1920. They could. I mean, it's whatever the council's desire is.
Okay.
And the other part is, remember, the caveat that we got saddled with before is a check with, this is what we want you to spend it on, right? So then that's the other thing that kind of can throw all of this out the window.
In 18, we did get 2 supplements in the 18-19 fiscal year budget. We did get 2 supplements like that, one and then one at a later date. So.
Any other
Anything
questions?
That's a good process question. So after all of these different metro departments submit their capital needs, how do they then prioritize as for the city?
Typically speaking, the planning department will review it against their overall Metro Nashville planning document that they have. And it's one thing that I've had a discussion with Metro Planning about, that it doesn't necessarily fit. They're looking at growth district-wide when they assess these plans. Sometimes our growth is in one area of the county, or a need is in another area of the county, and not necessarily district-wide. So when they look at their priorities, sometimes they can be different in context than what ours might be. We're looking at our schools, we're looking at kids, we're looking at mobility, demographics, et cetera. They're looking at planned growth within the district. It's a little bit different, but that's what will happen. They will weigh that against that plan, and then they will make a recommendation, an A, B, C, or D grade, if you will, to each project in terms of priority, and then they will submit that to the mayor's office. Sometimes that aligns with what we will say is our priorities in year one. Sometimes they don't. And we do have discussions with them about that prior to them issuing that document to the mayor's office. We did last year, but as the follow-through went, those priorities that we would have indicated did not necessarily make it through to their priority list.
Thank you.
I have another question. The population projections that they use, do we have those? Do we have access to those?
Brian Latimer works closely with Metro Planning and projecting our student enrollment projections. Formerly worked with Metro Planning.
Yes, I did. Yes, we have access to their population projections and things like that. They primarily rely on census data and kind of some of those kind of forecasts as well. But yes, we have ways to see what they're projecting in areas of town.
And I don't know what it would look like, and I think you've provided it to us before when we were talking about student projections and student enrollment. But if there's some way that we can marry that information here, I think that would be helpful. And I'm not trying to get you to create a new document, just something that says, if it looks like the cluster data, however it can look, so that we can say, here's what's happening in our schools in this cluster, here's what we believe is happening in, in spirit of transparency, when I look at the schools in District 1 that have the lowest capacity utilization scores on here, if I can't make an argument that there's going to be a population boom, although I can't get out of my neighborhood in less than 10 minutes anymore, so something's going on. You know what I mean? So if there's a way that we can have something that says either by cluster.
Sure.
Yeah.
We can look on putting that together. We've had 5 and 10-year projections that were now, I guess, more like 3 and 7 years that we can share from MGT. And we're also in the process of coming up with our own way of doing it. We bought some software last summer that looks at birth rates in the county. It factors in developments. That was the largest piece of it that we had to get our hands on. There's somewhere around 6,000 units under construction in Davidson County. And then you kind of start tying in student yield rates to those, and you start trending things out long term. So yes, we can get that.
Anything else, guys? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
This is adjourned.
Oh.
Like for real, for real? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so nothing up for operating. So as you guys take a look at the modified capital improvement budget request, remember, just to remind you, there are no changes to that last, this is what we need to do to keep things, the ceiling from falling in. Page, that's my back page, is my new name for the back page. And then the one change that was made to the page 1, year 1 ask, moving Robert E. Lillard in lieu of not having yet had our MNPS next discussion, which would definitely, with Lillard being one of our priority schools, our innovation schools, would be something to consider how we handle that facility. So if we can get a motion so that we can move forward with this.
Motion to approve the capital spending budget request.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion, any other questions? All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? You can't do it all. Sorry. Can't do it all. I know you, all right. All right, we have this approved unanimously. Thank you, Chris. Now we're adjourned.
I'm sorry, sitting here reading, just silly.